Our reading today is found in Deuteronomy chapter 20, verses 1 through 20. This is the word of Yahweh. When you go out to war against your enemies and see horses and chariots, an army larger than your own, you shall not be afraid of them. For Yahweh your Elohim is with you, who brought you up from the land of Egypt. Before you engage in battle, the priest shall come forward and speak to the troops, and shall say to them, Hear, O Israel, today you are drawing near to do battle against your enemies. Do not lose heart, or be afraid, or panic, or be in dread of them. For it is Yahweh your Elohim who goes with you, to fight for you against your enemies, to give you victory. Then the officials shall address the troops, saying, Has anyone built a new house but not dedicated it? He should go back to his house, or he might die in the battle and another dedicate it. Has anyone planted a vineyard, but not yet enjoyed its fruit? He should go back to his house, or he might die in the battle and another be first to enjoy its fruit. Has anyone become engaged to a woman, but not yet married her? He should go back to his house, or he might die in the battle and another marry her. The officials shall continue to address the troops, saying, Is anyone afraid or disheartened? He should go back to his house, or he might cause the heart of his comrades to melt like his own. When the officials have finished addressing the troops, then the commanders shall take charge of them. When you draw near to a town to fight against it, offer it terms of peace. If it accepts your terms of peace and surrenders to you, then all the people in it shall serve you at forced labor. If it does not submit to you peacefully, but makes war against you, then you shall besiege it. And when Yahweh your Elohim gives it into your hand, you shall put all its males to the sword. You may, however, take as your booty the women, the children, livestock, and everything else in the town, all its spoil. You may enjoy the spoil of your enemies, which Yahweh your Elohim has given you. Thus you shall treat all the towns that are very far from you, which are not towns of the nations here. But as for the towns of these peoples that Yahweh your Elohim is giving you as an inheritance, you must not let anything that breathes remain alive. You shall annihilate them, the Hittites and the Amorites, the Canaanites and the Perizzites, the Hivites and the Jebusites, just as Yahweh your Elohim has commanded, so that they may not teach you to do all the abhorrent things that they do for their gods, for their Elohim, and you thus sin against Yahweh your Elohim. If you besiege a town for a long time, making war against it in order to take it, you must not destroy its trees by wielding an axe against them. Although you may take food from them, you must not cut them down. Are trees in the field human beings that they should come under siege from you? You may destroy only the trees that you know do not produce food. You may cut them down for use in building siege works against the town that makes war with you until it falls. It is often challenging to discuss guidelines for warfare. As of the 2023 update, the PDF version of the Law of War Manual produced by the United States of America's Department of Defense is 1,254 pages long. The document includes rules regarding torture, the taking of hostages, the treatment of detainees, what kinds of weapons can be used, and so on. Comparatively, the Covenant of Sinai's rules guiding warfare are exceedingly brief. Though other passages add some detail to the three major areas of concern highlighted in Deuteronomy chapter 20, what we find in the verses we've just read are emblematic of what we find elsewhere. Deuteronomy chapter 20 breaks down the Covenant of Sinai's rules of war into three broad areas: those who fight for Israel, those who fight against Israel, and the land on which battles are fought. We'll explore each of these concerns one at a time. First, we'll consider those who fight for Israel. God instructed the Israelites through Moses as follows: When you go out to war against your enemies and see horses and chariots, an army larger than your own, you shall not be afraid of them. For Yahweh your Elohim is with you, who brought you up from the land of Egypt. Before you engage in battle, the priest shall come forward and speak to the troops and say to them, Hear, O Israel, today you are drawing near to do battle against your enemies. Do not lose heart or be afraid or panic or be in dread of them. For it is Yahweh your Elohim who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies, to give you victory. When the Israelites were engaged in war, they were not to consider their strength to be in numbers, technology, the skill of their personnel, or any other of the conventional weapons of war. When the Israelites went to war, they were to trust God to be with them. This faith was paramount. Nothing else mattered. Of course, implied within this commendation was the warning that Israel was not to go to war without God or against God's wishes. Because faith was the most important quality of any Israelite soldier, the way God asked Israel to build military ranks was unique and, by conventional wisdom, foolish. Moses continued as follows: Then the officials shall address the troops, saying, Has anyone built a new house but not dedicated it? He should go back to his house, or he might die in the battle and another dedicate it. Has anyone planted a vineyard but not yet enjoyed its fruit? He should go back to his house, or he might die in the battle and another be first to enjoy its fruit. Has anyone become engaged to a woman but not yet married her? He should go back to his house, or he might die in the battle and another marry her. The officials shall continue to address the troops, saying, Is anyone afraid or disheartened? He should go back to his house, or he might cause the heart of his comrades to melt like his own. When the officials have finished addressing the troops, then the commanders shall take charge of them. Essentially, God did not want anyone fighting in Israel's battles who had divided loyalties or regrets, or who lacked faith in God Himself. First, if a person had just built a house, but had not had opportunity yet to live in it, that person should be exempted from service. It's unclear how long it took to dedicate a house, but it was likely at least a year. Second, if a person had planted a vineyard, but had not yet enjoyed its fruit, he should be exempted from service. This may have been a longer period of exclusion, since Leviticus chapter 19 verses 23 through 25 instructed the Israelites as follows: When you come into the land and plant all kinds of trees for food, then you shall regard their fruit as forbidden. 3 years it shall be forbidden to you. It must not be eaten. In the 4th year, all their fruit shall be set apart for rejoicing in Yahweh. But in the 5th year you may eat of their fruit, that their yield may be increased for you. I am Yahweh, your Elohim. So depending on when the vineyard was planted and how one interprets the year of rejoicing in Yahweh, this exemption might have lasted as long as 5 years. Third, if a person had become engaged but was not yet married, he was to be exempted from military service. Engagements in Israel could have been long periods of time, so the length of this exemption is difficult to discern. Even more, once a person was married, they were given an automatic 1-year exemption in addition to the engagement exemption. Deuteronomy chapter 24 verse 5 explains as follows: When a man is newly married, he shall not go out with the army or be charged with any related duty. He shall be free at home 1 year, to be happy with the wife whom he has married. Fourth, any person who might have been afraid or disheartened, that is, who lacked faith in God to do battle for the Israelites, was to be exempted from military service. Suffice it to say that getting out of military service in Israel seems to have been extremely easy. But this was due to the different way in which Israel was to approach conflicts with those who made themselves their enemies. As Dr. Peter Craigie has explained in his commentary on Deuteronomy in the New International Commentary on the Old Testament series, the various exemptions from military service stated here follow from the logic of verses 1 through 4. Israel's success in war would not be based on military power superior to that of the enemy, but it would depend on the presence and power of God in the midst of the army. Hence, exemptions from military service could be granted on the basis of morale or for compassionate reasons. The object of the officers of the people was not to get the largest possible army, but the best possible army. The best possible army was the one wholly committed to God and absolutely confident in His strength and ability for the battle lying ahead of the army. That's the end of the quotation. This is, in part, what King David meant when he wrote the following in Psalm chapter 20, verse 7. Some take pride in chariots, and some in horses, but our pride is in the name of Yahweh our Elohim. Can you imagine any nation on earth embracing these criteria for military service? I cannot. And of course, in the new covenant of Jesus, God's people are not to establish a kingdom upon the earth. Therefore, conventional rules of war have been left to the nations of the earth to determine. However, with that said, This does not mean that the people of God today are not engaged in a war. But the war in which we are engaged is not one against flesh and blood, as St. Paul the Apostle has explained in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 20. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his power. Put on the whole armor of God so that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For our struggle is not against enemies of blood and flesh, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, so that you may be able to withstand on that evil day, and having done everything, to stand firm. Stand therefore, and fasten the belt of truth around your waist, and put on the breastplate of righteousness. As shoes for your feet, put on whatever will make you ready to proclaim the gospel of peace. With all of these, take the shield of faith, with which you will be able to quench all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. Pray in the Spirit at all times, in every prayer and supplication. To that end, keep alert, and always persevere in supplication for all the saints. Pray also for me, so that when I speak, a message may be given to me to make known with boldness the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains. Pray that I may declare it boldly, as I must speak. And as was true with Israel, followers of Jesus today are not to be fooled into thinking that our victory over the forces of evil has to do with numbers, or wealth, or technology, or slick marketing, or any other mechanism used by the kingdoms of the earth to extend their influence, or to peddle their goods, or to increase their market share. As was true with Israel, Christians must recognize that it is Yahweh your Elohim who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies, to give you victory. And of course, the victory that Christians are promised, according to St. Paul, is victory over the devil's schemes and a life lived full of truth, righteousness, peace with God, faith, salvation, and deliverance from evil. Second, we'll consider those who fought against Israel. God instructed the Israelites through Moses as follows: When you draw near to a town to fight against it, offer it terms of peace. If it accepts your terms of peace and surrenders to you, then all the people in it shall serve you at forced labor. As we discussed in Discussion 2, Fearing the Nephilim, Discussion 3, Displacing the Demonic, and Discussion 13, Banished Nations, the people groups which inhabited the land of Canaan itself were to be treated differently than those who lived in the surrounding territories. Since we covered this subject extensively in those previous 3 discussions, we'll not go into detail with respect to it here. However, what is new to this passage is God's command with respect to those who made themselves enemies of Israel from the areas surrounding the land of Canaan. Assaults from such groups happened routinely throughout the history of Israel. Notable people groups with whom Israel continually battled were the Philistines, the Midianites, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, and eventually the Greeks and the Romans. Not to mention near relatives like the Moabites and the Ammonites. According to the Covenant of Sinai, any time Israel came into contact with these outlying nations, and Israel moved to capture one of their cities or settlements, they were first to offer the city terms of peace. Dr. Craigie explains this offer as follows. The verse indicates that the Israelites were to offer the inhabitants of such cities the terms of a vassal treaty. If the city accepted the terms, it would open its gates to the Israelites, both as a symbol of surrender and to grant the Israelites access to the city. The inhabitants would become vassals and would serve Israel. This was a common practice at the time. In fact, several Israelite cities became vassals for the competing superpowers of the day throughout their history. One might say that the Jewish people were vassals of the Roman Empire during the lifetime of Jesus. Ideally, therefore, assaulted cities would choose to become Israelite subjects as opposed to battling against them. This was option 1. However, Moses went on to explain as follows: If it does not submit to you peacefully, but makes war against you, then you shall besiege it. And when Yahweh your Elohim gives it into your hand, you shall put all its males to the sword. You may, however, take as your booty the women, the children, livestock, and everything else in the town, all its spoil. You may enjoy the spoil of your enemies, which Yahweh your Elohim has given you. Thus you shall treat all the towns that are very far from you, which are not towns of the nations here. We might recall that when the Israelites attacked a city which was situated in the land of Canaan and belonged to one of the nations associated with the Nephilim, they were to kill men, women, children, and animals. They were also not to collect any of the treasures, food, or other wealth of those cities. They were to be completely destroyed. However, if their offer of peace was refused, and they defeated a city outside of the land of Canaan, they were only to kill the men. The women and children were to be spared, and the wealth of the city could be preserved. Given the cultures of the time, such women and children would have become widows and orphans, unable to care for themselves. It was for this reason that the Israelites were commanded to take them into their houses as servants. This passage does not indicate that the women could be raped or forcibly married, since the Covenant of Sinai already prohibited adultery and other forms of extramarital sexual intercourse, and had required the Israelites to marry Israelites. Though it may sound strange to our ears, servanthood was a way in which the Israelites were commanded to love their enemies in these cases. These requirements of the Covenant of Sinai may sound quite distant from the teachings of Jesus, but most of this is due to the fact that the new covenant establishes a kingdom that is not of this world, and therefore which does not engage in the conflicts of the nations of the earth, or at least should not. But still, God has required people of faith to love their enemies, though in a different way, now that we are exiles on earth and not citizens of an earthly kingdom. Jesus has explained these requirements as follows in Matthew chapter 5, verses 38 through 48. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd mile. Give to everyone who begs from you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Thirdly and finally, we'll consider the land on which Israel's battles were fought. God instructed the Israelites through Moses as follows: If you besiege a town for a long time, making war against it, in order to take it, you must not destroy its trees by wielding an axe against them. Although you may take food from them, you must not cut them down. Are trees in the field human beings that they should come under siege from you? You may destroy only the trees that you know do not produce food. You may cut them down for use in building siege works against the town that makes war with you until it falls. Essentially, God required Israel to leave the land habitable for the future whenever they sieged a city. They were never to clear cut the land or to destroy a land's ability to provide food for its people. In other words, victory was not more important than the land's capacity to provide sustenance. Perhaps it was to requirements such as this, and to the fact that they are rarely followed by nations of the earth, that St. Paul was referring in Romans chapter 8, verses 18 to 24, when he wrote the following: I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory about to be revealed to us. For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the children of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not of its own will, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay, and will obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning in labor pains until now, and not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly while we wait for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. For in hope we were saved. Here we too should be reminded that God's intent is not to redeem only humanity, but all of creation. The material world is not a mere contrivance to God, nor is it simply a means of sustaining or punishing humanity. When God first created, he called all of creation very good, and God's intention, according to the scriptures, is to recreate not only humanity, but all of creation. As Isaiah has prophesied of the reign of Jesus in Isaiah chapter 11, verses 1 through 10, a shoot shall come out from the stump of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. The Spirit of Yahweh shall rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of Yahweh. His delight shall be in the fear of Yahweh. He shall not judge by what his eyes see, or decide by what his ears hear, but with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt around his waist, and faithfulness the belt around his loins. The wolf shall live with the lamb, the leopard shall lay down with the kid, the calf and the lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. The nursing child shall play over the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put its hand on the adder's den. They will not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of the knowledge of the Lord, the knowledge of Yahweh, as the waters cover the sea. On that day, the root of Jesse shall stand as a signal to the peoples. The nations shall inquire of him, and his dwelling shall be glorious. The Israelites were to remember God's concern for the fertility of nature, even in war. We too, if we are his children, should remember this in how we live as well. May those who have ears to hear listen to what the Spirit is saying to the churches. Amen.